This has been a wild offseason. I mean, with Jonathan Taylor, now with Cooper Kupp, we've had some players to the very top of these rankings that we've had to push down dramatically. And honestly, it's going to change these overall tiers in terms of how we're valuing running back versus wide receiver. And I'm actually going to be expanding tier 1 to include pretty much the top 2 tiers, where we're going to be leading off with Jefferson, Chase, CMC, Kelsey, Tyreek, Bijan, and Austin Eckler. Now, you'll notice in these overall rankings, we did move up Tyreek Hill ahead of the running backs like Bijan Robinson and Eckler, just because if you are looking at round 1 now, it's going to be much more difficult for you to make the argument to go ahead and select Cooper Kupp. But I mean, if we're going to go top to bottom here, obviously Jefferson, Chase, we've said it all offseason. These guys are 1 and 2. Each of them could respectively get to 2,000 receiving yards this season. And they also have an incredibly high floor overall. With CMC, he's the RB1 in fantasy. I mean, last year in Underdog drafts, he won us a $100,000 tournament and a $20,000 tournament on his own. Travis Kelce at 4 is 34 years old, but I mean, he's been the tight end 1 for, I want to say, 5 straight seasons. Then with Tyreek, this is a wide receiver that averaged 108 receiving yards per game with Tua last year. And with Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, I think both these guys have it in the range of outcomes to be the number 1 overall fantasy football scorer at the running back position. So if you are in your fantasy football draft, I'm kind of fine with you going in any order of these players in this tier. And that's the goal of these overall tier lists, right? Is I want you to definitely take your own spin on it. I'm an idiot. I'm going to be wrong all the time. If you think Mason, no, come on, man, I got to be taking Austin Eckler over Bijan Robinson. You do you go make that decision. I just want to make sure that we're staying within the tiers as we go through our drafts. Now, our next tier will be led off with the Mr. Cooper Kupp. Now, I really don't know what to expect. This is a wide receiver that now is labeled day to day after re-aggravating the hamstring. This is a wide receiver that's going to be pushing 30 years old. And I have noticed in the live streams as of late that Cooper Kupp is falling to the 1-2 turn. So there's a possibility that if you're at the end of round 1, say you're at pick 8, you're at pick 9, you may actually be able to pass on Cooper Kupp in favor of someone like Stephon Diggs and still get Kupp on the way back around. But yeah, Diggs will be our next guy at 9, incredibly high ceiling, incredibly high floor. I mean, he's been a top 10 wide receiver for 3 seasons straight. He averages over 110 total air yards per game. CeeDee Lamb, our next guy. I mean, this was a mid-wide receiver 1 last year with an injured Dak Prescott, with a team that was top 5 in the NFL in rushing attempts. He's younger than Kenny Pickett, so he's probably going to keep on getting better as well. Obviously, A.J. Brown in an elite level offense, still in his prime. Devontae Adams has been arguably the best wide receiver in fantasy over the past 5 seasons, but now he is going to be pushing 30 years old, and at the same time, you probably have the worst quarterback play of his entire NFL career. Saquon Barkley at 13, running back that I've been drafting all offseason. You used to be able to get a discount on Barkley when people were worried about the contract situation. Now you're not going to get that discount anymore. And then Josh Jacobs, 14, Nick Chubb, 15. We already go Jacobs ahead of Nick Chubb, and I understand everybody going to the comment section saying, Mason, you can't draft a running back that led the NFL in touches last year. That's a super small sample thing that people are looking at. In reality, if you look at every running back that saw more than 300 carries and 50 receptions at 26 years old or younger since the year 2000, the next season, over half the time, these guys are top 6 running backs in fantasy. About 75% of the time, they're top 12 running backs in fantasy. So I'm not worried about that. I'm still drafting Jacobs aggressively, and with Chubb should be in a better spot this next year with no Kareem Hunt. But overall, how we want to be valuing wide receivers, running backs, tight ends in these leagues is going to be very dependent on your league settings. If you're going to be playing in a league where maybe it's a full PPR format where we're a little more inclined to go through and put wide receivers in the flex spots where you can start 2 or more flexes and you can get up to 4, 5 starting wide receivers in your lineup, to be honest with you, you probably want to be going wide receiver in the early rounds. You want to be pushing those wide receivers up and potentially looking at a 0 RB approach. However, if you think you can pull off a 0 running back draft strategy in a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, I'm sorry, you're going to be way behind the 8 ball. By no means should you go through and try to build a 0 RB team if you're in a format like that. So please understand the format that you're playing in and how you should be adjusting these rankings overall. Of course, I'm live streaming every single night if you want to come out here and ask me specifically about your exact format. Now, our next tier will be led off by Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Both these wide receivers, are elite level studs. They're the next generation of the Davante Adams level players, right? With Wilson, the man averaged 11 targets per game in games with no Zach Wilson. Now those targets are going to be coming from Rodgers going into year 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown could potentially lead the NFL in receptions this next season. And the thing about it is both these players have incredibly high floors. Now, maybe you're going to get a higher ceiling with someone like Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard in year 18 is in a perfect setup, right? He was the running back 9 last year. Now you have no Ezekiel Elliott, and we can assume that he continues to expand his role in this offense. Steve will probably run the ball a little bit less, but Tony Pollard will probably actually just get more touches overall based off him getting a significantly larger slice, even if it is a smaller pie. And then Derrick Henry at 19, I know this is going to look low. This is going to look high depending on the actual draft platform you're on. If you're in Underdog drafts, you can get Derrick Henry at the 2-3 turn. And yes, we've been drafting him there all offseason. But if you're in your ESPN draft where you're going to see Derrick Henry go over Nick Chubb, you just simply can't take him. Because if we're going to be fair with Henry, he's going to be running behind the worst offensive line in the NFL. He's pushing 30. Running back that doesn't really catch passes. I know he's phenomenal, and that's why we're going to be willing to overlook those red flags and take him in round 2. I just can't have you taking him in round 1. Now, dropping down to our next tier, these players I want you to get in every league. I want you to come out of your draft with one of Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, or Josh Allen. Now, the instance where I think you can go ahead and pass on one of these players in the late second to beginning of the third round is if you're going to be playing in that league where you can start up to 5 wide receivers, right? If you're in a league where you can start up to 5 wide receivers, then at that point, quarterback scoring is going to make up a much smaller percentage of your lineup output overall, where you can push these guys down. But if you're in that league with only 1 flex spot and only 2 starting wide receivers, then at that point, if you draft someone like Jalen Hurts, you're going to get such a leg up over the rest of the field, and they're not really going to be able to catch up with you when it comes to putting out a strong wide receiver 3, a strong wide receiver 4. There just aren't enough starting lineup requirements for them to be able to actually bridge the gap between the elite level quarterback scoring and then the guys below. But as we're with these quarterbacks, I have to point out something that I've literally never seen before across any site, and especially not on Underdog. Underdog has a free special pick'em site-wide, more than less than half a total yard for Patrick Mahomes against the Detroit Lions. Plus, only with promo code FLOCK are you also going to get a site-wide special Josh Allen, more than less than half a passing yard against the Jets week 1. And if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you are also going to get a mystery pick'em on top of this week 1. That's 3 special pick'ems. I've never seen 2 in the same week before. So please make sure you are taking advantage of that. You're only going to get all 3 with promo code FLOCK. Also, promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 100% deposit match up to $100. You're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide. We're still getting into Underdog drafts every single night on the live stream. They're best balls, so no time commitment at all during the season. So I drafted 700 teams, won $150,000 last year. But now, staying in the same tier, we are going to have Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave. I love both these wide receivers, right? It really just comes down to your overall start in your draft and if you're wanting to go after these players. Full transparency, if you're in that 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, and say you start off your draft with Jamar Chase round 1, then A.J. Brown makes it back to you in round 2. You probably don't want to be taking one of these wide receivers round 3 just because you're going to have phenomenal wide receiver values later on. However, if you're in a 12-team full PPR format with a couple flex spots, 100% go after these guys. Love both players. Now, our next tier will be led off with Mark Andrews. Now, Andrews will be similar to the elite level quarterbacks. We can throw Lamar in here as well, and that you're more so wanting to target these guys in that league with only 1 flex spot. Because in that league with only 1 flex spot, wide receiver, running back depth, not going to matter as much. Just go out there, get you an elite 1C skill position, get you an elite tight end, get you an elite quarterback. Hell, actually, Lamar Jackson is one of my most invested into players in Underdog drafts. I think he is the most invested into option that I have. We used to get him at the 3-4 turn, and if you're looking at his ceiling, he had the best fantasy football finish ever from a quarterback in 2019. Now, our next two guys will be T. Higgins and Devonta Smith. Obviously, both wide receiver twos in their respective offenses. But, I mean, these are going to be the cream of the crop in terms of wide receiver twos, elite offenses, great talent profiles. And I am willing to go through and take shots on them because they have such a high floor regardless. And if you were to see an injury in their offense, they both have incredibly high ceilings as well. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Travis Etienne 29. I've been very high on Etienne all offseason. We used to draft him in round 4 of Underdog drafts nonstop. He has been rising as of late, so it's definitely a lot harder to get Travis Etienne now. What I will say, if we're going to be looking at Etienne, he's a running back that profiles where he could potentially see work on all 3 downs. He's still on his rookie deal. He's going to be in a very good offense with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I really like the player. Now, Ramondre Stevenson as our next guy is a little bit difficult to get behind in a non-PPR format and a half PPR league because there you're most likely going to see Ezekiel Elliott have that role in the red zone, and that's going to cap the overall touchdown ceiling that you have from someone like Ramondre Stevenson. That's why you may see me taking Joe Mixon ahead of Ramondre in a half PPR format, whereas we can go Ramondre in a full PPR league just because Ramondre should still be in the running to actually be a top 5 running back in overall receptions this next season. But Joe Mixon 31, really no red flags, right? I mean, it looks like you have no legal issues to worry about anymore. I mean, he restructured his deal, so you know he's a Cincinnati Bengal this next season. He's in an elite offense. He was a top 6 running back last year from a points per game perspective. He had the involvement as a pass catcher. You have Samaje Perine in Denver. I mean, wheels up for Joe Mixon, ladies and gentlemen. And our next guy will be Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs, very similar to Stevenson, right? You're more so looking at him in that full PPR league. Still think that you will have David Montgomery with a pretty nice role this next season. But Jahmyr Gibbs, elite level athlete, great offensive line. And on top of this is a running back that, I mean, is so damn good. He was the top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Now, our next guy will be DK Metcalf. We used to have DK Metcalf actually at the bottom end of this tier. And I know the reports with Jackson Smith and Jigba sounds like the recovery process is going well. He dodges the PUPs, back at practice. But I still think that Jackson Smith and Jigba probably starts a little bit slower than he would have if he didn't have his injury. And for that reason, we're going to push DK Metcalf ahead of Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley. And I know everybody wants to look at Ridley here and go, Mason, you my man, you are way too low. And I agree. I'm probably too low on Calvin Ridley. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I wanted to be higher on him. I thought coming into this offseason that everybody was going to be worried about Calvin Ridley when we haven't seen him put up top numbers in over 2 years. Last time we really saw him be productive in fantasy was 2020. I thought everybody was going to push Calvin Ridley down to round 4, round 5. And I was going to say, guys, y'all forgot this is a wide receiver with an elite level ceiling from a talent perspective. He has great quarterback play with Trevor Lawrence. I'm all in. I'm taking him in round 3. Yeah, I mean, Calvin Ridley goes in round 2 of Underdog drafts. So your boy has not drafted Calvin Ridley in about a month. And I may or may not be pretty scared about it. Now, going down to our next tier, we are going to be looking at Naji Harris at 36. Now, I understand nobody likes Naji Harris, right? And Naji Harris is definitely on a horrendous trajectory. I mean, if you look at what he did as a rookie, then going to year 2, really the only running backs we've seen since year 2000 on this trajectory were James Robinson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, not great comps at all. But with that being said, Naji Harris was dealing with the Liz Frank last year. He was in a horrendous offense with Mitchell Trubisky and a rookie quarterback. He was behind a bad offensive line. Now the offensive line will probably be improved. We know Kenny Pickett's going to be improved going into this next season. Naji Harris is no longer dealing with the Liz Frank. But with the Jaylen Warren performance in the preseason, you've actually seen Naji Harris begin to fall in these drafts. Like I took Naji Harris in the 5th round of a $500 Underdog draft the other day on the live stream. So honestly, kind of fine with Naji Harris at his current price point. I wasn't drafting a lot of him earlier this offseason, but that was just because I had Travis Etienne ranked ahead of him. Now, our next 2 guys will be Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. Now, if you're playing in an Underdog draft where we know those wide receivers are going to get pushed up, then you move these running backs down. But here in your regular redraft format, I'm going to expect that the best picks in rounds 6, 7, and 8 are naturally going to be some incredible wide receiver value. So I think you can push the RBs up. Now, full transparency with Breece Hall, he is not going to be that good at the beginning of this season, or at least you shouldn't expect him to. You shouldn't feel like you have to rely on Breece Hall for the first month of the year. I think Dalvin Cook actually will have a very large role in this offense. The reason I'm ranking Breece Hall here is I'm thinking about the long-term upside and what he can be for the fantasy football playoffs. But if you're going to be someone that drafts Breece Hall, panics 3 weeks in when Dalvin Cook may look like the starting running back, and go ahead and sell Breece Hall for peanuts in week 4, then don't draft him. You have to know yourself. Are you willing to draft him, throw him on the bench, and hope that we have the elite level ceiling halfway through the year? Now, our next guy will be Joe Burrow, and we can throw Justin Fields here as well. Really dependent on if you're in a 6-point passing touchdown league or a 4-point passing touchdown format, right? 6-point passing touchdown league, you're going to go with a guy like Joe Burrow, who could potentially lead the NFL in passing touchdowns. Whereas if it's a 4-point passing touchdown league, then the rushing upside of the quarterback position is going to matter a little bit more. And we can pivot over to Justin Fields. Now, someone that I've actually been drafting a ton of as of late is TJ Hawkinson. The man is now pretty much the highest paid tight end in the NFL. The man was a top 5 tight end from a points per game perspective last year, just stepping into his prime. This is an offense that's going to look to throw the ball over and over and over again. We know tight ends typically don't break out till their second contracts anyway. So in my mind, the stars are aligning where if you were to tell me that TJ Hawkinson is the tight end 2 in fantasy this year ahead of Mark Andrews, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Now, Deebo Samuel will be our next player at 42. And with Deebo Samuel, I understand nobody likes the guy, right? Every single person's going to go out there and go, oh, I actually think Brandon Ayuk is the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco. I think the guy is Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel is garbage. It's a consensus take at this point. Everybody loves Ayuk. I'm more so looking at it saying, okay, I don't care if Ayuk looks like the better guy on the TV screen. I understand he looks like the traditional wide receiver, whereas Deebo Samuel's getting these manufactured touches. And with the usage for Deebo Samuel, he's definitely trending in the wrong direction. That's why we're going to have him down here in round 4 in comparison to where he used to go last season. But to be fair, 2 years ago, Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver 3 from a points per game perspective. Like Deebo Samuel's 2021 season was arguably just as good, if not better, than Calvin Ridley's 2020 season. Deebo Samuel's elite season was more recent than Ridley's. And obviously, I don't think you should have Deebo Samuel ranked ahead of Calvin Ridley, but I do want to just put into some context here. Well, yeah, he's trending in the wrong direction, guys. It's still someone that showed us an elite level ceiling, whereas 2 years ago, Brandon Ayuk was like the wide receiver 56 from a points per game perspective. Now, Christian Watson will be our next guy. And if you're in your like regular redraft league on like ESPN, Yahoo, whatever it may be, you actually may get Christian Watson way cheaper than this. Like Christian Watson does not go this high. So I maybe would actually recommend for you to wait and see if you can get Christian Watson in round 5 instead. But personally, I mean, I just love this dude. I mean, this is someone that was at the very top of the NFL, only behind players like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp when it comes to his yards per route run last year. He did that as a rookie. Now, full transparency, I have no idea if Jordan Love's going to be any good, right? Jordan Love's probably going to be bad. Imagine Jordan Love doesn't come in and give you Aaron Rodgers level quarterback play. But that's why Christian Watson's going this low. If Jordan Love was guaranteed to be great, you would have Christian Watson up there in the same tier of guys like DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley. So you're really just banking on Christian Watson's talent. And if Love turns out to be any good, then Christian Watson can crush this price point. Kind of say the same thing with Aaron Jones. With Aaron Jones, I haven't been really drafting him unless we're going to get discount. The reason being, you have no idea if Jordan Love's any good or not. And if you're looking at Jones, so running back that is now going into his age 28, 29 season, historically speaking, this is when you see the fall off for running backs. I mean, going and looking at the year Aaron Jones had last year and looking at all running backs that had a similar season at that age, every single one of them either got injured or declined going into their following season. 100% of the time. So you combine an uncertain situation with natural running back decline at his age. I'm going to be off Aaron Jones if you have to take him in like rounds 2, 3. I'm going to take him in round 4, but not in the top 36 picks. Now, Jonathan Taylor will be our next guy at 45. And with Jonathan Taylor, I want to be very upfront. You probably don't have to go through and draft him this high. And you'll see me possibly draft Jonathan Taylor in some spots on the live stream. You'll probably see me pass on him in others. So my thought process on Taylor, specifically right now for your regular redraft leagues, are if you have to take Jonathan Taylor and then you have to keep him on your bench, you can't move him down to your IR, then there is absolutely no reason in hell for you to draft Jonathan Taylor. If you have to keep Jonathan Taylor on your bench, prohibiting you from actually making moves at the beginning of the season, then at that point, I would rather probably have another 20 guys instead of Jonathan Taylor here. But with that being said, if you are in a league where you can put him on your IR, then I think he is appealing at the 4-5 turn, given his upside that he could potentially have later in the season. To go with this, if you're in an Underdog Fantasy draft in a new tournament that just recently drops, I know they were going to drop the Puppy 4. That's like the $5 buy-in. No idea how large that tournament's going to be. Probably like $1 million prize pool. If that drops today, then I'm probably going to be avoiding Jonathan Taylor just because everybody in that tournament's going to have a severe discount on him. However, if you're in like Best Ball Mania on Underdog, that's going to be the $25 buy-in, $15 million prize pool, $3 million first place prize. And so many of those drafts were done in April, May, June, July, August, where Jonathan Taylor was a first, second, or third round pick. There, I'm going to be actually pretty excited to draft Jonathan Taylor like round 5, just because if he does give us the elite level ceiling later in the year, and we're going to be going up against other teams that took him in round 1, and we're probably going to have a better roster than them overall. Now, going over to our next running back, we'll be looking at Miles Sanders. I mean, Sanders has the contract. He has a quarterback that's probably going to have a high check down rate as well, knowing that Bryce Young isn't really going to scramble too much. So I'm completely fine taking Miles Sanders where he goes. And Damien Pierce is going to continue to be one of my favorite picks this offseason. I mean, I'll reiterate, Devin Singletary was brought in to be a backup running back. Every position needs a backup, okay? It's the NFL. These guys get injured. You look at the Singletary contract, you look at the actions taken by the Houston Texans, especially in the NFL draft. Don't necessarily think that you're going to have to be worried about what you have with Damien Pierce's workload going into this next season. Also with this, you're upgrading from Davis Mills to CJ Stroud. So I really like Damien Pierce going into this next year. Now, our next guy will be Justin Herbert. With Justin Herbert, I think you could maybe move him to the top of this tier if you really wanted to. It's an awkward spot, right? Because if you see some teams go through and take, say, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen round 2, then you see a couple teams take Joe Burrow as well as Justin Fields round 4, then you kind of get the sense that you can usually get Justin Herbert on the way back around round 5. But you really do want to just be paying attention to your overall league, how the quarterback position's trending, because quarterback's going to go in wildly different positions based on your league mates and based off the actual draft that you're in. Now, our next two guys will be wide receivers going into year 10 that are both individually showing signs of slowing down. We have Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I understand everybody is going to hate me saying that Keenan Allen is slowing down, but it's true. If you look at his targets per game, if you look at his target share on a per game basis, if you look at his overall fantasy football finish per game over the past 3 seasons, all 3 have trended down, down, and down. With that being said, they also go through and add in a round 1 talent in Quentin Johnston this next year. So it is going to be a little bit concerning with Keenan Allen. And in the case of DeAndre Hopkins, a player that literally got cut earlier this offseason, right? He's going to an offense that's probably not going to have a lot of passing volume. He's going to an offense that's probably going to be pretty damn bad overall. So to be realistic with these guys, obviously at their respective points, they were elite level talents. But with that being said, I think they each individually have reasons why you should probably be a little bit nervous going into this next season. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Again, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to check out the Patrick Mahomes special pick'em Thursday night against the Lions, if you want to check out the Josh Allen special pick'em Monday night against the Jets, also get a mystery additional pick'em if you are new on Underdog. You can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the comment section in the description. Promo code FLOCK is going to get you all 3 of those a 100% deposit match, our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide. I've literally never seen anything like this before. I've never seen anything close, so please make sure you are taking advantage. And also, we're still drafting Underdog teams every single night on the live stream right now, so make sure you come by to get into some drafts with us. They're best ball, no time commitment at all during the year. It's how I drafted 700 teams, won $150,000 last season. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you, and I really hope I get a draft with you in the live stream later tonight.